It's time for Tab Talks, your weekly conversation about matters of faith. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash.
And I'm your guest co-host for this one time, Maggie Evans. For all of you who are immediately concerned about where Debbie is, don't worry, she'll be back next week. But I was really excited about this subject matter, so she let me hop in.
All right, and we are talking about the Enneagram, specifically the Christian Enneagram. And we have with us Alabama native and self-proclaimed enthusiast, Richard Clark. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, great to be here.
All right, so Richard is from Eufaula, Alabama, and grew up attending First Baptist Eufaula, Parkview Baptist in Eufaula, and has a lot of other connections through our Baptist world. He is now with Useful Group, a marketing agency, and has lots of experience actually, working with Christianity today. He also co-hosts No Chill Enneagram, a podcast that he, I think I remember him saying he can't stop talking about it, so he just decided to form a podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah, I found a friend on the internet over Twitter who was in a similar place than me, and we made a joke about starting the podcast for that reason, and then we did it.
Fantastic. How long has it been going?
Oh gosh, I don't know. When people ask, I don't even know how long I've been married, so it's hard for me to tell you how long this has been going. I'm gonna guess like 3 years, something like that. Let's say 2 years, because we're about to finish up our second season. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get us started, and then Maggie and I'll just kind of go back and forth with all of our questions because we want to know everything about the Christian Enneagram. So tell us, first of all, just a basic concept of what is the Enneagram.
So the Enneagram is essentially, a lot of people describe it as a personality test. That is not what it is. That's super annoying to people who know what the Enneagram is, to be honest, because the Enneagram is essentially like a tool that you use to know yourself better and to grow as a person, and also sometimes relate to other people better, depending on the circumstance. So essentially it's sort of has 9 different numbers, which sort of group people into 9 different types. And those numbers are not really about who you are. Like, it's not really about your identity. It's more about sort of the false idea that you have about yourself, sort of the false assumptions that you have about your place in the world, things like that. And so what the Enneagram does is it sort of pulls back the curtain on, you think this is universally true, but actually not everyone feels this way. And also it's not fundamentally true about you either. And so I think that's sort of the idea behind, that's what the Enneagram is.
Awesome. And so what is your Enneagram?
So I'm a Enneagram 4.
Mm-hmm.
With a 3 wing, though I sometimes have that 5 wing as well. And I guess if those who don't know what wings are, I mean, you don't know what any of that means, so it's fine. I'm an Enneagram 4 with a 3 wing.
Well, what does that mean?
Okay, so an Enneagram 4 is commonly referred to as the romantic, or the the creative. 4s are all the sort of like surface level stuff that you'll see with an Enneagram 4 is an obsession with authenticity, with being themselves, with attention a little bit. The sort of core thing that's happening there is the Enneagram 4 is sort of bound and determined to be known and seen. A lot of people talk about it as they want to be special. What's really happening there is they want to be seen for the unique thing that they are, just like everyone else. And they assume everyone else wants the same thing, right? And so when they interact with people, they're really good, right? When they interact with people, they're really good at seeing them, right, in those moments. The truth. So to sort of clarify how that is a lie, the truth is that God knows us as we are and sees us as we are. And so theoretically, I don't need anyone, theoretically, right? I don't need anyone to see me and know me for who I am. If the creator of the world and the creator of all of these people and the king of all of these people knows who I am, and still loves me, right? And so that's sort of like an example with an Enneagram 4, how you would sort of gain that self-awareness, like, oh, this is what I'm all about, and that's why I'm doing that. And the idea, right, is not to settle in that mode, to get stuck there. It's to grow out of that to where you're not like as obsessed with being known in that way.
So it is different than the Myers-Briggs, the DISC profile, the Berkman method. All of those are more personality profiles, and you're saying this is different, correct?
Yeah, it's different both in its depth, right? And I think you can tell a little bit, like Myers-Briggs and definitely Strength Finders are about, here's what you are, lean into that, right? And there's a little bit of like, to put it more negatively than I mean to, but it's a little bit like stasis, right? Like you're encouraged to sort of like be where you are, and maybe if you grow, you would grow into those things. Whereas the Enneagram is really built to show you how to grow out of those things. And so, and there's so that's the depth piece. The other thing is how you figure out what your number is. Like fundamentally, there is a test you can take. It's a good starting point, but the recommendation of a lot of Enneagram experts, which I feel like I should clarify, I'm not like an official Enneagram expert, and we make that disclaimer on our podcast as well. But at this point, I've like taken in a lot of information by osmosis, so I can talk to you as I feel like I'm qualified for this podcast because I'm a Baptist who likes the Enneagram a lot. But what is recommended is that you sort of live in a number for a while, read about it, and figure out if it fits, right? Like, are you consistently showing the traits of that number? My personal advice is ask someone extremely close to you, like your wife or your husband or an extremely close friend, because those people will tell you the truth. My wife knew I was a 4 well before I did. I was convinced I was a 7 for a long time, and it just was not true. So and the third thing I would say is the third way that you often find the number is just, and this is also like my recommendation, but if you hate that number, it's probably you, because it like triggers something in you where you're like, those people are the worst. That works more, I think, especially for 4s, right? 4s don't want to be 4s because it like categorizes your thing.
And so unique, you cannot be categorized.
Right, exactly. And so, I think that's also a good sign that could be your number.
Yeah, I second that. I would say I am a 2 wing 1.
Mm-hmm.
So a 2 is the helper. And when I read the profile, I was like, gross, no thanks.
Yeah.
Real whiny.
Yeah.
Real, just love me. Because the core fear for a 2 is to be unloved. And so like then what Richard was talking about, the depth there is to like know that you are loved by the Lord, and like he's the only thing who can make you whole, and you only need to seek him, as opposed to seeking affirmation and affection from all these people around you by becoming useful to them. So that's why that's like the core motivator is I want to be helpful so that you will love me.
Right.
I'm super manipulative and terrible, and I absolutely despise telling people what I am. Like, oh, and I'm like, yeah. So it's so true. My husband was like, "You're such a 2." I was like, "Okay, you need to get away from me."
Which, by the way, you're such a fill in the blank. Bad phrase. Sorry to your husband, but like, don't say that ever. Yeah.
Well, I mean, is that part of the issue? Do we want to try to grow into another number, or is it something that we are what we are and we just have to figure that out?
So the question you're asking is kind of like, so are we supposed to try and be, this is going to sound trite, but are we supposed to try and be like Jesus, or is that impossible? And the answer is yes to both of those questions. Right? Like, I think fundamentally, like the point is to grow into the middle of the circle, right? And there are a lot of different theories about how to do that. And I don't even remember them all, or really, I wouldn't do them justice if I went into it, but there are different lines you can follow that, or lines that you naturally follow, right? So like every number has like stress and
And like
numbers and health numbers, right? So numbers that you go to when you're in a stressful situation or finding yourself stressed out, and then numbers that you go to when you're feeling great, when you're in security, basically. And so for 4s, I go to 2 when I'm stressed out. An example of that is, say my wife is saying you don't do enough around the house. I get mad and I infuriatingly go outside and mow the lawn, right? Like, just to show her, as if that's going to show anyone. But that's a classic move for me, is like I will start washing the dishes frustratingly. And the 1 is the health number for me, and that is to-do lists. That is objectivity. If I'm in my feelings, the things that are going to help me are like things that bring the facts, right? Bring the receipts to me, and I know this is the thing that is actually true in the world. So
for sure. And I would say that for people who don't know the Enneagram super well, like you look at it as a circle and there's numbers all around it, and you're going to see, you will see attributes of yourself in each of the numbers.
Yeah.
But it's really more of that, what drives most of your decision making. And that's what I think, kind of just circling back, is what's super helpful about it, is that you can see all these common trends and see almost like core sins, like I would say, like pride.
Yep.
So I want to be loved and I want to be thought of as a certain way. So you can see those, like, your motivations more clearly throughout. Once I knew this, I felt like I could drill down and see similar, essentially just core sins across the board, what I did and how I related to my husband, how I react at work. Like if I get really mad at something, it's because I felt stupid, because I want to be seen as useful and helpful, and how dare you make me feel stupid type thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's really helpful in that way. And just to throw out to the audience who doesn't know what Jennifer's Enneagram is, I believe she is a 3-wing 2. So
Nice.
she's an achiever. And if you know Jennifer, you're like, well, all you have to say is achiever. So that's correct. So
Maggie has diagnosed me, yes.
I have also conferred with some other coworkers who are Enneagram fans as well, and we have all agreed. So, well, that's not
so, and then this is another moment where I'm going to say, disclaimer,
don't
generally bad practice to assign someone an Enneagram. And what the Enneagram teachers will say is that's a journey that is really important for that person to go on for themselves. Because they're just not going to internalize it in the same way. I will say, like, they can go on that journey before or after they're told whatever. It's fine. Yeah. But that's the expertise, at least.
For sure, yeah. Don't do what I just did. But if you get into Enneagram, it's so much more fun.
It's hard not to do it.
It's helpful, so I can be cool in the conversations when people are talking about what they are. I can be like, yeah, I'm a 3-wing 2. Yeah. I know what that,
I say I'm a 3-wing 2. I know what that is.
Yeah.
That's the way to impress people.
Got it. Okay. Because I can guess people probably do try to talk and they don't have the information, and then is that obvious when someone will try to end the conversation?
So the big giveaway is when a wing is not next to the number. That's like a pet peeve within Enneagram circles, is like people go, I'm a 4-wing 7, and it's like, no, you're not. That like there is a way in which some people and will say I have soft 7 or something, like I have a low amount of 7, but I'm a 4. Which I don't know, I guess, sure. But then it just starts to all become like a big mush to me.
Well, that makes me think I would look at the list and go, I want to be this and this, so I'll just make my own, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? It's interesting to think through why is it that you want to be those things. It's just an interesting exercise, and I should say, like, the Enneagram is not divinely inspired as much as some people might think it is. Supposedly it's an ancient, people describe it as an ancient personality tool. My opinion, I mean, it is ancient. We know that. It goes back forever. The origins are fairly mysterious. But one of the reasons that me and Bethany Perkins started No Chill Enneagram back in the day is we just felt like people were taking it entirely too seriously, like literally talking about it as if you shall not mishandle this divine tool. And I think some of that comes out of a very real desire, like to preserve people's sense of identity and feelings. Like it's more about being careful with people than it's about being careful with the tool. But I do think it sort of ended up in that place at some point. And so we kind of wanted to take the air out of it a little bit in that way. So that's to say, it's like whatever is fine. Just be cool to people as you talk to them. If they're like frustrated at being a 3 and you're constantly telling them they're a 3, then that's a weird thing to do. Don't do that.
Not helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're listening to Tab Talks, and I'm your host, Jennifer Rash. We have guest host Maggie Evans with us, and we are talking with Richard Clark, Alabama native and enthusiast of the Enneagram. I can't say it. We are talking about the Enneagram and its role in the Christian culture. Richard, pick back up on that and let us know. You were mentioning how it's taken very seriously by some and almost feels inspired, divinely inspired in some levels. And it's not, of course, but tell us how it is. Why did it get so popular among Christian groups? And then what are some of the concerns on the other side of that?
Yeah, I think there are 2 fundamental and sort of paradoxical reasons that it became popular in Christianity. One is it's kind of a good fit for Christianity, which is to say it's the only personality test that seems to acknowledge sin. That I've seen. I said it, personality test. It's the only like one of those things, whatever you call it, that seems to acknowledge sin. And that is really useful for a Christian who believes in sin and sort of looks at a strengths finder or a Myers-Briggs and go, wait, but some of this stuff, like some of the traits that I have, I'm not comfortable with. And we have a sort of an inherent awareness of that. And so I think it's a good fit for that. The other thing I would say is it actually fills a big gap in Christianity from my experience, especially within evangelical Christianity. I don't know if I would say that. Let's just say a big gap in Christianity, maybe even humanity. I'm just kind of talking out of my experience, but the gap is one of self-awareness. I think a lot of Christians, and certainly a lot of like Bible theologians, Bible teachers, put a lot of capital in this idea of knowing the Bible, knowing God, but not a lot of capital in knowing yourself. And that can actually be a really bad thing. The Bible talks a lot about us and sort of talks a lot about encouraging us to know ourselves and to sort of delve into the heart of what is wrong with us fundamentally and what we're really trying to do. And when I say self-awareness, I mean, really what I mean is being aware of like the core reasons you're doing something beyond I want to, or I think it's right, or, they need this or whatever it is. It's really being aware of like, am I doing this because of, I think there's a sort of shadow of that in this question of why are we giving to the church? That sort of age-old question. Are you giving money out of just pleasing God? Or are you giving money because that's a good reason. Are you just giving it to show off? Are you and then the way Jesus talks about the Pharisees who plinking in the cup, really, obviously that's a classic 3 right there, sorry. But that sort of self-awareness is really important, and it doesn't come easy. It actually takes a lot of work, and this is just a helpful way of doing that. I think some of the issues that people had are somewhat valid. Like I mentioned, the Enneagram has been idolized by people. Like just it has. Like there's no question, and it can be taken too far, I guess you would say. And look, we're all guilty of idolizing different things, and one of the ways that you idolize over something is becoming obsessed with it. So I'm certainly guilty of this, to where you sort of read stuff about the Enneagram every day that comes in your email inbox, but you forget to do your devotion every day or something, like that's a telltale sign that one thing's more important to me than the other. And so getting to that place is a bad idea. And then other people just hear the name, they look at the sort of like circle with lines in it, and they go, well, that looks satanic, frankly. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people think that. That is unfortunate. Like, it's an unfortunate, like, look-alike thing. I personally don't see a lot of actual validity in that, like, in that truth, like in that idea. That certainly I understand why people would react that way. But I think it's pretty clear to me that there's no fruit of demonic influence there, right? Like there's no actual sign to me that the devil is involved with this somehow. And depending on your opinions, that could go all sorts of directions, but I'll just leave it there.
No, that works. Well, have you seen kind of, what are some good ways that you've seen like fellow believers and just like friends use the Enneagram to grow? Like how have you seen kind of that play out?
I have a lot of examples of this because I have a lot of friends who like the Enneagram, and I've seen, like, I will say this, like, the thing I have always loved about the Enneagram is it gives you sort of handles to grab onto and say, I'm struggling with this, or you seem like you're struggling with this. And this has to be done, especially when you're having a conversation about someone else, it has to be done with care. But I do think there's a way in which it sort of helps me to have a conversation with a friend and say, hey, I get it. You're a 7. You don't like to be still. You like to. 7s are, what are 7s? They're known as the enthusiast. And so they're the people who are constantly trying to hang out, constantly trying to do something fun. They're the life of the party. They have crazy ideas of stuff to do every night. But their problem is they're not always willing to sit with the hard things, the sad things. They're not always willing to grieve. And so I've had conversations with friends where you can kind of push through the coping mechanisms and say, hey, no, but for real, like, are you okay? Like, how are you feeling? And I think, or maybe start thinking in the long term, maybe start thinking like, what's going to happen if I keep doing this every night or whatever. It's just like it's really just sort of in a way like a conversational piece to have a discussion around if they're open to that. It's also just it helps you personally. I've seen it help my friends sort of think, oh, okay, I need to actually grow in the opposite direction of that thing. Like, I am naturally interested in that particular strength that can also be a double-edged sword. And that awareness of double-edged sword, sort of strength flaw thing, is I think a really valuable takeaway here from the Enneagram. And in my case, it would be like this idea of authenticity. Like, being myself is great and all, like that has obvious upsides, but I've learned over time that sometimes authenticity and being yourself just goes too far for people. Like, it's a radical disclosure to the nth degree, and it can not work. So I've learned to try and be a little more careful with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in marriage too, it's also very helpful.
Yes, 100%. I will say, yeah, it is honestly like one of the most useful things outside of the Bible and Jesus. It is one of the most useful things for our marriage by a long shot, because I know my wife's a 6. She knows I'm a 4. We know what our strengths are. We know what we appreciate, what we don't appreciate, and we can go from there. So.
Well, Richard's faith journey has brought him all the way through lots of different areas. So he grew up in Eufaula, Alabama's First Baptist Church and Parkview Baptist. He was at Florida's New Smyrna Beach Baptist Church youth minister. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Baptist College of Florida, Southern Seminary. He's now in the Midwest. His journey took him through several roles at Christianity Today. And so I think you have seen this play out in a lot of areas.
Right.
You mentioned the important role for it in marriages. Do you feel like this is a good tool to be used in premarital counseling?
Oh man, I totally would. Yeah, like if I were doing premarital counseling and the Enneagram wouldn't come up, I'd feel weird about it. Only because I just think it's such a good opportunity. It's like, when you're doing premarital counseling, you kind of use all sorts of tools to determine where people are, what their values are. People have questionnaires and all sorts of things. Man, even as just let's have a conversation about what these numbers mean and how much we relate to them or don't, I think is going to be like extremely useful for people in premarital counseling. And I should say, not to determine if this should happen, right? Because every number can work together in all sorts of ways. Some might be trickier than others, but all numbers can work together. It's just a question of how you relate to each other and how that awareness works in that context.
All right. Well, Richard and his co-host for the podcast, that name is No Chill Enneagram. You can find that anywhere you get your podcast. Richard, do you have any other resources that you would suggest for people who are interested in knowing more about the Enneagram, specifically the Christian Enneagram?
Yes. So the EnneagramInstitute.com is a great place to start. It's really exhaustive. It's going to tell you a lot more than you ever needed to know about Enneagrams, including like some weirdly like out of nowhere like celebrities that could be your number, which I always thought was funny because there's this rule you're not supposed to type people, but then they just type celebrities for no reason. Like apparently Bob Dylan is a 4, guys. Paul Simon is a 4. They just listed all the Alanis Morissette, all the musicians are 4s.
Pick out the ones that match him, Maggie. Did you see that?
Yeah. He's like,
yeah.
oh, yeah.
All the 4s.
Yeah, all the cool ones. Sarah McLachlan.
Mother Teresa, they say, was a 2, so that's all.
Okay.
Right. There you go. So, but the people just make that stuff up. So whatever. But the other stuff is really useful. There's a lot of information there if you want to delve deep, I would say. And then I'd also recommend a book called The Road Back to You. That's the one that brought me sort of the awareness of the Enneagram. The Road Back to You is written by Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile. And they do a really good job of contextualizing the Enneagram for beginners and for Christians in particular. And so, highly recommend that book.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. It was fun.
All right. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week.